Greetings, classmates, and welcome to Aaron and Chantae's presentation on our poster on a philosophy of inquiry. As you know, this course, Philosophies of Inquiry, is designed to expose us to the different philosophies that are part of our research and education, and how we go about defining reality, defining knowledge, and how we go about collecting or developing knowledge and then disseminating it. We chose a sort of interesting subject matter for our poster. We chose choice theory, which is really a theory of human behavior, a psychology, if you will. And when I first asked whether we could use this article for our poster, I was asked by Dr. Jones which of the philosophies of inquiry in our course we thought that choice theory seemed to fit most into. And I said, from my understanding, post-positivism, and I'm all the more convinced of that as we've delved more into this topic over the semester. We chose specifically an article written by Dr. Robbert Wubbolding entitled The Voice of William Glasser, Accessing the Continuing Evolution of Reality Therapy, which was published in the Journal of Mental Health Counseling in 2015. We also have some other references that we'll be referring to in the course, including Dr. Glasser's book in 1999 entitled Choice Theory, A New Psychology of Personal Freedom. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you all today in person. When we rescheduled this course, unfortunately, I already had a full day of patients scheduled for the new date that was selected, so I wasn't able to come and meet with you in person. That's why I'm recording this talk, and then Chantae will be there with you in person. She can add anything that I've missed from our poster that we collaborated on, and then she can field questions that you have and get some discussion going if needed. But certainly if you have any questions for me, feel free to contact me, and I'll be glad to clarify things as we go along here. So first, the actual poster that we provided you is in Canvas, and this is what the poster looks like. And we basically created a collage of different tiles that we think define or illustrate a lot of the concepts in this article about choice theory. But we're going to take these tiles one by one for the purpose of this presentation and kind of walk through it with you. First thing that I want to say is that by sheer luck, I was scheduled to go to the U.S. Journal Training Annual Institute on Behavioral Health and Addictive Disorders in Clearwater Beach in February. And I've gone every year now for 11 consecutive years to this training conference. And just maybe like a couple weeks after we selected this article, I was at the conference, I was looking at the program thinking, wow, what am I going to do tomorrow during breakout sessions? And I saw that there were several different segments over 2 days on reality therapy, which is the therapy that is rooted in choice theory principles. And then I looked at who was presenting these breakout sessions. Dr. Robbert Wubbolding was, who coincidentally is the author of the article that we selected for this project. It was like serendipitous. So I got the opportunity to interact with him during and after some breakout sessions, and to even ask him some questions that would help me to take the subject matter of what he was presenting on and sort of view it through the filter of this class on philosophies of inquiry. So some of the information that we'll cover today actually came from that interview with him in February. This is a picture of me on the right-hand side with Dr. Wubbolding on the left-hand side, and his very high-tech illustration of the WDEP concept of reality therapy. So who is the author? The author of the article is Dr. Robbert Wubbolding, who's a teacher, author, and a mental health practitioner. He's the director of the Center for Reality Therapy, and he is today really considered to be William Glasser's right-hand man and the leading contemporary voice on reality therapy, the therapy that's rooted in choice theory principles. Unfortunately, Dr. William Glasser passed away several years ago, and Dr. Wubbolding is continuing that legacy on of promoting the ideals of choice theory. Dr. Wubbolding is educated in philosophy, history, and counseling, and you will see how this theory and its implementation really does a great job of blending some of those different areas that he's been educated in. And I thought noteworthy that he also was educated in Catholic seminary. As he discusses in the article, he was attracted to choice theory because it really fit his worldview. And I think that maybe his education in Catholic seminary might have influenced that worldview. So why was this article written? What is the purpose of the article? Well, Dr. Wubbolding states in the article, "My personal mission is to apply choice theory and reality therapy in multicultural settings, to extend the principles expressed in the WDEP formulation, and to ensure that reality therapy, based on choice theory, is evidence-based and represented throughout the world of counseling, psychology, and social work." So I think that does a great job of illustrating why it was that he wrote this article. Now keep in mind, he wrote this article for the Journal of Mental Health Counseling. That is the flagship journal of the American Mental Health Counselors Association, so we could assume that it was written to inform mental health counselors of William Glasser's reality therapy, the psychotherapy and counseling approach that's rooted in choice theory. That really is the intended audience of this article, mental health counselors and counselor educators. Now, I also understand that he was actually invited by the Journal of Mental Health Counseling to write this article. So next, we'll move on to what was studied and also what makes it a critical perspective. Well, basically 6 things. There's 6 sections of this article. The first, Dr. Wubbolding talks about William Glasser's contributions to mental health. And we specifically say to mental health rather than to pathology, because choice theory is a very positive approach in the sense that the focus is on wellness rather than on pathology. Number 2, the article covers the principles of choice theory. 3, choice theory and neuroscience. 4, reality therapy, which is a psychotherapy that is based on the foundation of choice theory. 5th, there's a discussion on reality therapy and mindfulness. And then 6th, cultural applications of reality therapy are covered in the article. Now, something I thought was very interesting about these different subtitles is that I teach a course in the Rehabilitation Mental Health Counseling program called Counseling in Community Settings. One of the things we cover in that course is some of the emerging issues in the field of clinical mental health counseling. And some of those emerging issues include an emphasis on mindfulness. For example, the third wave of cognitive behavioral therapies, contemporary cognitive behavioral therapies, tend to do a great job of infusing mindfulness principles into therapy. And mindfulness, defined by John Kabat-Zinn anyway, who is kind of a guru of mindfulness and to those of us in the mental health counseling field, he defines mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And then another emerging issue in the field of clinical mental health counseling is multicultural applications, which has been increasingly a focus since the 1980s and expanding throughout time. And then another one of the emerging issues in our field is how to take all the wonderful knowledge that we've developed, in part because of advancements in brain imaging techniques over the past couple decades. How do we take these neuroscience findings and infuse them into mental health counseling and use that information to our benefit and the benefit of our clients? So I thought that Dr. Glasser or Dr. Wubbolding did a great job of covering some of the major emerging issues and how he's trying to take reality therapy through that filter of those emerging issues. And in addition, one of our other emerging trends is the emphasis on evidence-based treatments and providing empirical evidence to substantiate or support the different counseling approaches and techniques that we use. Okay, so what makes choice theory a critical perspective? One of the questions we were asked to answer about the article we selected. Well, first, our thoughts were that choice theory is critical of theories of human behavior that focus on external control, on the things beyond our control, versus internal control, the fact that we have choices that we can make and be empowered with in the present and in the future. Now, there certainly are some philosophies of inquiry that we have examined this semester that really emphasize societal forces, institutions, cultures, authorities, and so forth, and the impact of those external forces on our well-being, or on how we garner knowledge and disseminate knowledge. In choice theory, those external forces are certainly acknowledged as being contributors to individual learning and individual functioning and emotional wellness. But the emphasis is placed on internal control, what we can do ourselves, and what is within us. You know, in the words of Confucius, when we see men of contrary character, we must turn inward and examine ourselves. And in the words of Epictetus, an ancient Greek philosopher, men are not disturbed by things, but by the views which they take of them. In other words, an awful lot of human suffering is internally generated, and the good news about that is that if a lot of human suffering is internally generated, then we're tremendously empowered to experience alleviation and wellness. You know, in groups, self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, you will often hear a portion of the Serenity Prayer recited. And that first portion goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In other words, the idea that serenity is sort of a formula, that if I can identify what is beyond my control, and when I cannot change those things beyond my control, work on accepting them, but also shift my focus and attention to the things that I can do, the things that are within my control, I will probably experience a relatively serene life, a sort of recipe for serenity, if you will. And I think that's pretty consistent with choice theory. Second is that choice theory is critical of more subjective conceptualizations of reality, which we'll get to in just a moment. And some of the philosophies of inquiry that we've examined question whether reality even exists. The third is that choice theory is critical of external control psychology, which is a phrase that Dr. Glasser uses to illustrate or to describe how so many entities in society are using power, force, or coercion to try and control others instead of turning inward and looking at ourselves. And then finally, choice theory is focused on individual responsibility versus collective responsibility per se. Now, by the way, a little side note, a little fun fact that's probably way more fun for me than for you. There is an error on this slide that anybody who knows nothing about choice theory should be able to identify if they look closely enough. I'm curious if you can find that mistake on this slide. Anyway, so what the thesis or argumentation of choice theory is what we'll talk about now. Chantae chose this graphic for this slide for a reason that we'll get to in a moment. First, like I said earlier, we identify choice theory as being post-positivistic, but we also think it has elements of critical theory, and that those elements of critical theory are also elements that you'll see in post-structuralism and in some of the gender and age-based sort of philosophies of inquiry as well. First of all, with the post-positivism side of things, reality is a collection of natural laws and social phenomena in post-positivism, and reality exists outside of the individual and independent of the individual's perceptions. Reality exists. There are real things that exist out there, whether we think they exist or not, or regardless of how we think about them or what we think we know or don't know about them, they exist. Knowledge is information about the world, and it's produced through observation. We may never fully know what's real or not, but we know part of it. And we probably know enough to be able to do something constructive with it. Now, I asked Dr. Wubbolding about the epistemology of choice theory. And he gave me a couple interesting metaphors. The first one, he pointed to a wall in the room, and he said, you know, certainly people can argue that there is no wall there, or that the wall only exists if people think it exists or perceive that it exists, and so on. But no matter what the individual's argument may be about that wall, if that individual says, I am going to walk through that space, and they walk towards that wall, they will surely hit something that will stop them. And that something is reality, and it exists independent of the observer or the observer's perceptions of that reality. So Chantae chose this graphic because we have a guy walking into a wall here, maybe with his idea that the wall's not real if I don't think it's real or whatever else. So these interesting philosophies, I mean, they're intellectually stimulating, but they're not very practical in some respects. But Dr. Wubbolding also said, you know, we may not really fully know what reality is, and that we try to gain knowledge about reality through observation. So that's a very post-positivistic element. But we say that there are elements of critical theory and maybe post-structuralism because there is an emphasis on examining the power struggles in society that result from attempts to impose one's knowledge or perception onto others through force or coercion. In choice theory, there is the precept that we cannot control other people. All we can do is provide them with information and influence, but we ultimately cannot control them. They take that information from us and they decide what to do with it. Well, I'm going to read you two quotes from Glasser's Choice Theory book, published in 1999, that I think illustrate this concept much better than I can. The first, and I quote, "All else we perceive from the outside world, including what we perceive from our bodies, is information. But information is not control. Choice theory explains that stimuli, in the sense that they can consistently control a human being to make a specific choice, do not exist. Since information does not make us do anything, we can choose to ignore it or act on it in any way we see fit. We are not machines. We are not, as machines are, designed to respond in a specific way to an external control. When we do as we are told, it is because we choose to do it on the basis of the information we have." End quote. And a second related quote, "I call this universal psychology that destroys relationships because it destroys personal freedom external control psychology. The control can be as slight as a disapproving glance or as forceful as a threat to our lives, but whatever it is an attempt to force us to do what we may not want to do. We end up believing that other people can actually make us feel the way we feel or do the things we do. This belief takes away the personal freedom we all need and want. The simple operational premise of the external control psychology the world uses is punish the people who are doing wrong so they will do what we say is right. Then reward them so they keep doing what we want them to do. This premise dominates the thinking of most people on Earth. What makes this psychology so prevalent is that those who have the power, agents of government, parents, teachers, business managers, and religious leaders, who also define what's right or wrong, totally support it. And the people they control, having so little control over their own lives, find some security in accepting the control of these powerful people. It is unfortunate that almost no one is aware that this controlling, coercing, or forcing psychology is creating the widespread misery that, as much as we have tried, we have not yet been able to reduce. This misery continues unabated not because we have thought it over and decided that controlling others is best. It continues because when people do not do what we want them to do, coercion and control are all we think of using. It is the psychology of our ancestors, our parents and grandparents, of our teachers and leaders, of almost all the people we know or know about. Coercion to try and get our way has been with us so long that it's considered common sense and we use it without thinking about it. We neither care where it came from nor question its validity." End quote. I couldn't say it any better, and that's where you see that there are elements from some of these other philosophies of inquiry that we explore in this class. Now, the 5 principles of choice theory, oh, by the way, we were just talking about force and resistance, and we chose this tile because this is a picture of Aikido practitioners. Aikido is a martial art where instead of using force to attack people or to defend yourself, you simply redirect their energy or their force away from you. And you do so in a way that minimizes any unnecessary harm or force against your attacker. So even when defending yourself against an aggressor, you are trying to not be coercive and forceful. You're just redirecting energy. So the 5 principles of choice theory. Number 1, behavior is aimed at satisfying needs. There are 5 genetic needs that we'll get to in the next slide. Second, there's a concept called the quality world, and the quality world consists of the preferences and the wants and the images that we create in our minds that we think will help us to accomplish those needs in concept number 1. We always say that when a therapist develops a therapeutic relationship with a client, the therapist has become a part of that client's quality world. Number 3, total behavior. Thoughts and beliefs and attitudes and emotions and physiology and actions are all considered part of total behavior. They use the suitcase metaphor in choice theory because you can think of all that stuff like emotions and physiology and cognition as being the suitcase, but action is the handle. And when you take action, when you choose certain actions, all of those other components come along with you. Wherever you take that handle, the rest of the suitcase will follow. Number 4, there are perceptual systems. Here we emphasize the individual's perceptions that relate to their well-being. And then the 5th concept, I have labeled it cognitive dissonance. And the reason I did that is because essentially what I see in the 5th concept is cognitive dissonance, the idea that there's an incongruity sometimes between our values and our behavior, and that we become motivated to take action then to bridge the gap between the two. The 5 genetic needs that we referred to earlier, number 1, survival or self-preservation. That kind of makes sense. Most of us want to survive and preserve ourselves. Number 2, love or belonging. And this second component is highly emphasized in choice theory, and especially, by the way, in choice theory applications in educational settings. Number 3, power or inner control, achievement and accomplishment. Number 4, freedom or independence. And then finally, fun or enjoyment is the 5th genetic need. So in theory, all human behavior is aimed at satisfying one or more of these 5 genetic needs. Now, what exactly is this paper? This article is not an experiment or a study in that sense. It is more like a literature review and a position paper that was written to convey the principles of choice theory and reality therapy to counselors and counselor educators. What are some of the implications for choice theory and number 1, reality therapy, the therapy that is based on choice theory principles. So basically the mental health treatment profession or industry, or you could say the wellness industry if you prefer. That's a major area of application of choice theory. Number 2, quality schools, which are schools that are specifically trained and then certified and designated as quality schools that implement choice theory in educational settings. There are some wonderful scenarios in some of the books on choice theory in schools that show you in a variety of environments, whether we're talking rural school settings or inner city urban schools with high dropout rates, or schools in South Korea or Iran. There are some incredible stories of what happens when you start using choice theory in school settings and how the relationship between student and teacher changes substantially. Total quality management is a management style that you could say is influenced by some choice theory principles. Choice theory has been applied in the criminal justice system. And then finally, international implementation. You will see implementation well, first of all, in Europe, unlike the United States, counseling associations can actually endorse therapies. So you'll see that in Europe, reality therapy has been endorsed by the European Association for Psychotherapy. Reality therapy has been implemented empirically in Korea, the Philippines, and Malaysia. And Glasser's quality schools model has been implemented internationally, including in Ireland, Colombia, Slovenia, Korea, Australia, and Iran, specifically South Korea. Now, I was going to bring in these books and show them to you, but for now I'll just have to settle with a picture. This is the text Choice Theory, written, or most recently written in 1999 by Dr. Glasser, A New Psychology of Personal Freedom. If you're interested in choice theory, I would recommend you really start with this book. It really does a great job of laying out the philosophy of choice theory. But also, if you are more interested in choice theory as it's applied in counseling through reality therapy, this book entitled Counseling with Choice Theory would be a great start. And then finally, choice theory in the classroom, because most of you are in the special education concentration, for what I understand. Unlike me, I'm in the counselor education concentration, so you may be more interested in how choice theory is implemented in the classroom. And this could be a great read for you in that scenario. So now let's move on to our discussion about the contribution to the theory here. We believe that Dr. Wubbolding is essentially carrying Glasser's voice into a new century, exposing another generation of counselors and educators to choice theory and reality therapy. The emphasis on shifting from external control psychology to internal control may substantially change educational, criminal justice, and mental health institutions internationally, perhaps. Choice theory can be thought of as a philosophy inspired by both post-positivism and critical theory, and post-structuralism perhaps, that blends elements from both philosophies and applies them in practical ways in society. So now we'll kind of move on to our reaction to choice theory. Number one, let's talk about strengths. One of the strengths of choice theory that Chantae and I identified is that it can be very empowering, because reality therapists, for example, are constantly sending the message to their clients that they strongly believe that clients have the power to choose to make new choices and healthier choices in the here and now and going forward that can dramatically improve their quality of life. And second, we believe that choice theory can be very practical. Because it deals with reality, and because it focuses energy and effort where people have the most bang for their buck, their own thoughts, actions, and behaviors, and how they themselves can be empowered to bridge that incongruence between values and behavior. But there are some possible weaknesses and criticisms for choice theory. One is that choice theory can be misinterpreted or misapplied to blame the victim, perhaps by de-emphasizing the role of external or systemic variables in an individual's wellness. Now, Dr. Wubbolding does address this possible criticism in his article, and he actually talks about how people will about how the reality therapist using choice theory never blames the patient or the client. Instead, they are acknowledging that certainly external variables have had an influence, but they are emphasizing that they have strong belief and confidence in the client's ability to make choices in the here and now going forward that will better themselves, that they have power, tremendous power that they can tap into internally. So that is sort of the rebuttal to the blame criticism. But also, and this is actually identified in some of the ancillary studies I was looking at on international applications, specifically I think South Korea, or maybe it was the Malaysian study, but the idea that choice theory approaches may need some modification in more collectivistic versus individualistic cultures. That maybe it needs to be packaged a little bit differently sometimes to make more sense to people in more collectivistic cultures. What will we take away from this article that we've read and from choice theory in general? Well, a few things. Now, we can debate all day long about whether reality really exists and what reality is and so forth, but you know what? If nothing else, it is awfully useful to believe that there really is a reality and that it exists externally from the observer. You know, if you look at D.C. Phillips in his writings, he would argue that we cannot survive without having beliefs about these things, that we have to act on the idea that there are real things, regardless of what we think or believe about them, and make choices consistent with those beliefs. Number two, Criticisms of external control psychology may counter oppression, persecution, and neurosis internationally. We believe that the principles of choice theory can be implemented in a variety of institutions and on an individual level worldwide with tremendous beneficial outcomes. Third, choice theory meshes well with contemporary counseling trends that are focused on implementing neuroscience and mindfulness and multicultural application. And then finally, the increased emphasis on evidence-based treatments and interventions. So as counselor educators, we are teaching our students about the importance of evidence-based treatments as well as some of the criticisms of them. And so reality therapy, which was not necessarily originally an evidence-based treatment, it appears that Dr. Wubbolding is trying to get more research done to empirically demonstrate the effectiveness of reality therapy. And it is evidence supported. There are many, many studies. And there is, by the way, an international journal of reality therapy, if you're interested in it, that is free online for anybody to view. You just Google International Journal Reality Therapy, and I'm sure it will pop right up. Well, I'm going to conclude my portion of our discussion on our poster now. And by the way, this individual that you see in the middle here of this slide is Dr. William Glasser, the late and great Dr. William Glasser. And I just want to let you all know that I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there today, because I've really enjoyed getting to know each of you and to be on this journey together as we explore some of our premises and beliefs in our philosophies of inquiry. And I hope to continue interacting with you as colleagues going forward. Now I'll turn things over to Chantae, because I'm sure she has some ideas that she wants to add, and for her to be able to also address any discussion or questions that you may have. I wish you all well.